I'd like to call to order the February 8th, 2024 Louisville Planning Commission meeting, welcoming our new commissioners, Bangs, Hunt, and Mahaley, with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bangs. Commissioner Basket. Commissioner Choi.
Here.
Commissioner Hunt. Commissioner Mahaley. Commissioner Moline.
Here.
And Chair Brown Eyes.
Still here. Humor is a dangerous thing. Motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved? Or a second? Sorry, I
All
didn't
right.
hear. Okay.
All in favor? Aye. Carries. Looking to our minutes from November and December. So for the new commissioners, we will have you all abstain from this. And then for those of us who were here, I wanted to check in to see if anybody has any consequential changes that they would like to raise regarding those minutes. No? Seeing none. Motion to approve the November 2023 minutes.
Oh,
You could do either way,
I,
both.
oh,
November
I
and
can't-
December.
I can't.
Okay,
I was
right.
gone from December, so I,
Right, so we'll do November separately. Motion to approve November.
so moved?
You can't move it if you're, oh yeah, you were here. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Motion to approve the December 2023 minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. All right. I would open it up to public comment for items not on this evening's agenda. I see we have 3 attendees online. No raised hands. If anybody wanted to, you would use the raise hand button. Seeing none, move into our first item of business. And we'll do you want to begin with who wanted to present on this? Or you want to speak to it, or you want me to speak to it, or?
No, there's no staff presentation. This is just, sort of housekeeping things like it says. There's two, A and B are a little different, and the first one is just informational. You don't have to vote on it. It's just so you're aware of these two documents. I did want to call your attention to, certainly encourage you to read the open government pamphlet that's in your packet. It has all the information generally applicable to boards and commissions.
I'd go one step further, not encourage, but require.
Require. Thank you. And so, and then the rules of procedure are also required reading. I did want to call your attention to a few things that the clerk asked us to do. One being on page 34 of your packet, page 3 of the rules of procedure. There's a provision in there that if you miss more than 25% of the meetings during the year, it's grounds for removal from the Planning Commission. Second thing, regarding electronic participation, there is a provision in there also. It basically says that the meeting can carry on if we have a tech glitch and the Zoom doesn't work, provided we have a quorum. So that's an important one. That's on page 5 of the rules of procedure. And then the last thing, definitely take a look at the staff and board expectations section of the rules of procedure, which is basically just laying out, particularly for the new members, sort of our roles and your roles generally, which is also applicable across the different boards and commissions. So that was it on those things. If you have any questions or want to do a deeper dive, we're happy to do that.
Great, thank you. Any questions at this point? Seeing none, all right. Move into our next item. The first issue at hand is election of officers for 2024. If I would entertain a motion for that.
Chair, I would like to move to re-elect Commissioner Brown Eyes as chair and Commissioner Moline as vice chair and Commissioner Basket as secretary.
Thank you. Who do we get to set? We can have anybody second that. All right, thank you. And I think we should do a roll call technically on that one.
Yes. Yep.
What's that? All 3 together, yeah.
Okay. So Commissioner Mahaley. Commissioner Choi.
Yes.
Commissioner Basket.
Yes.
Commissioner Moline.
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt. Commissioner Bangs.
Yes.
And Chair Brown Eyes.
Yes. Thank you all for that. Approval of posting locations for agendas. I don't have it in front of me, but it's City Hall and the Police Department and the Rec Center, and there's a fourth location, Library, yes.
There's a attachment in your packet as well that lays them all out, but it's as per usual in what we did last year.
Yeah. So it's not a motion though, but you need our vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one and the next item need your vote.
So motion to approve the posting locations per usual.
Second.
Second, if we have,
All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Mahaley.
Yes.
Commissioner Choi.
Yes.
Commissioner Basket.
Yes.
Commissioner Moline.
yes.
Commissioner Hunt.
Yes.
Commissioner Bangs.
Yes.
And Chair Brown Eyes.
Yes. And our final item here, approval of our expected Planning Commission 2024 meeting dates, the second Thursday of every month at 6:30 PM. Motion for that.
So moved.
Second. Yeah,
All right, nice. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Mahaley.
Yes.
Commissioner Choi.
Yes.
Commissioner Basket.
Yes.
Commissioner Moline.
yes.
Commissioner Hunt.
Yes.
Commissioner Bangs.
Yes.
Chair Brown Eyes.
Yes, thank you. I will now open the public hearing on a request for a resolution regarding electric vehicle charging. The purpose of the hearing is to receive evidence regarding the application materials and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on this request before the Planning Commission. The procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. First, there will be a presentation and testimony by city staff, followed by questions from the Planning Commission to staff. After this presentation, members of the public who have joined this meeting in person by computer or telephone may speak regarding the application. Anyone who would like to speak in person is asked to complete a speaker card if you're here. Use the raise hand function if participating by computer or *9 if calling in by telephone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. 2 people present at the meeting may pool their minutes to allow one person to speak for up to a total of 6 minutes. The purpose of public comment is to receive public testimony and not a forum for debate or dialogue. Commenters are encouraged to raise pertinent issues and may ask questions for clarity. However, these questions will not be directly answered during the public comment period. The applicant, which is staff, will then be allowed to make a closing statement. I will then close the public hearing and no further testimony or other evidence will be received unless the commission decides to reopen the hearing. The Planning Commission will discuss the matter and may approve with conditions, deny, or continue to a future meeting. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. All testimony must be presented after stating your full name and city of residence. Does anyone participating in this hearing object to the procedure I've described? Seeing no raised hands, do we have notification?
Yes, good evening, Chair Bryan-Ice, members of the commission. This is a public hearing. It was published in the Daily Camera and posted at all required city locations.
Thank you. Do we have any disclosures for Planning Commission members? Seeing none, I invite you to take it away.
All right, thank you. I'm Rob Zuccaro, Community Development Director for the city. I'm going to be making the staff presentation on this evening. So just a little bit of background. In 2021, the city adopted its first electric vehicle charging standards by Ordinance 1816. This was part of a series of other code adoptions, including the adoption of the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code and the Net Zero Residential Code that went along with that. So that International Energy Conservation Code was both for commercial and residential. And then a residential net zero code. So the city was undertaking a series of code amendments to try to get more efficient buildings, try to transition away from fossil fuel infrastructure, promote electric infrastructure. Following that, the city in 2022 adopted an additional commercial code for all electric water and space heating. So that was for commercial buildings, their domestic water, not their processing water, and their standard heating of the spaces that wasn't industrial heating or anything like that. It was to, again, transition away from fossil fuel. The reason I'm bringing that ordinance up with the one that was in 2021 is that there was quite a bit of business pushback on those codes. There was a lot of concern about the feasibility of implementing all of those codes. So City Council asked us last year to meet with the businesses, meet with property owners, developers, and try to understand what some of the feasibility issues were with all of those codes. So we did have an open house in August where we had a lot of businesses and property owners and developers attend that meeting, and we received a lot of good feedback. We've also been working with our staff and some consultants to really understand some of those feasibility issues. We are drafting some code amendments that are going to go to City Council related to the building codes, but especially for the new commission members. You all look at the zoning code portions of it. You don't look at the building code portions of it, so that's really just background. The one thing that we did put in the zoning code were the EV charging standards. Some of the feedback that we received at that August open house last year was that our EV charging standards were fairly stringent compared to some other cities and that have also adopted those standards. And there was a suggestion that we look at a new state code. It's a state model code that was adopted, I think, in June of last year. It's a model electric ready code, and it included EV charging provisions. And so we did look at that code, and this proposal is based on that code. So this is what we adopted in 2021, and we broke it out into a lot of different types of uses. There's the residential single family, and then we got into apartments, and then we broke it down into a couple of different tiers of commercial uses that we thought would have different demand. And we have 3 different categories: installed, ready, and capable. So installed means you have actual chargers installed. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Ready means that you have the electric panel and conduit and the electrical wires actually going to the space, but you don't have the charger installed yet. And then capable is that you have the conduit going to the space. Your electrical panel has room to put in a new circuit, so it's sized for future service. So we had each of these categories based on use for all new development. So this gets triggered with any new development and any building addition of 25% or more new square footage of an existing building. So this is what we've had on the books. This is what our proposal is. So this aligns with the state model code. It really breaks down the different categories into commercial, non-R2, which is really all of your standard commercial. So that could be industrial, office buildings, retail. And then we have commercial R2 occupancies. Commercial R2 is an apartment building or an apartment building and some other group type occupancies that are residential in nature. So there's a different set of requirements for that. Again, the commercial is a little less stringent. With the residential, the idea is that there's more people living there, having demand to charge. The commercial is a little less stringent because it's mostly employees. It's a little bit of people actually using the business. So those tend to have less stringent requirements. There's a new category in the state code, which is EV capable light, which means really you just put the conduit in. Your electric panel doesn't have to be sized. So that means when you do want to use those, you might have to upgrade your electrical service. So there's a new category of the percentage of spaces. So, so this is the proposal. We didn't change the residential for single family. It's still 1 ready and 1 capable. So basically this brings, I would say, down really in all of the category. Oh, let me mention this too before I get into a comparison. I think Commissioner Banks, thank you, he noticed we had a typo in the ordinance. So I think we were missing the number 10 here in our proposed table. So just wanted to point that out. We'll make that correction if this moves on to City Council. So it's broken into these categories. I did put them side by side here so you can kind of see a comparison. There are fewer spaces required in really each of the categories as you move along here. The total number of installed is less. The ready spaces is a little bit more in some of the categories. But it's comparable a little bit, but the installed spaces are a little bit less. So it's a little bit less stringent is the point. So I think this is what the businesses were asking for, the developers and the property owners. We did look at a few different ordinances. We put in the packet the Lafayette ordinance and the Boulder County ordinance. Lafayette's ordinance is actually, I would say, a little more stringent than our proposal. The Boulder County existing ordinance is less stringent. So there's a wide range of what's out there that we could consider. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions and see if you all would like to recommend this to City Council.
Open up for questions, Commissioner Mahaley.
Thank you. I have a few questions. Starting with the definition of new, so is this just for new development, or how would renovations fall under this?
Yes, it's only a renovation where there's a building addition with 25% or more new square footage.
25, okay. So like renovating something on Main Street, or like perhaps the Kohl's building, staying roughly the same size, this wouldn't be
Yeah, if
applicable?
you keep the building the same size, it doesn't trigger the requirement.
Okay, thank you. And then, so if you go to Table 2, so could you help us understand the different categories? And I guess the question is, let's just take the example of the commercial buildings, R2 occupancies with 10 or less parking spaces, right? So if you make 15% of your spaces EV ready, does that also satisfy the other categories? Or do you need each of the categories so about 35% of your spaces are going to be some level of EV
That
readiness?
is the second, yeah. So
Okay.
they build on each other, yep.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Basket?
I appreciate you having the side-by-side chart up. So I'm only concerned, I think, until I hear further discussion about the proposed residential buildings. And I'm concerned about multifamily dwellings. And I will give you a typical example. My daughter and son-in-law gonna finally get a new car. Boy, do they want to get an EV, and they're in a multi-unit development that has no charging stations, so they cannot do that. I really think that multifamily units need to have some requirement.
Right, so in the proposal, if it's a multifamily development with 10 or more spaces, they'd have to put in 5% actually installed.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
are recategorized residential, because you
Yeah,
had in the other
sorry, yeah.
table. I'm sorry, Rob.
Yes,
let you
so
finish.
let me restate that for clarification. So here we have residential, single family and multifamily. Commercial R2 is multifamily.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah,
All right,
so we're
thank you.
Yeah, so we are going down though from 10% right here we were saying with a multifamily, so we had two different categories. We had multifamily with dedicated spaces, it was the same as single family. If we had multifamily without dedicated spaces, it was 10%. So we are going down from 10 to 5 installed, but we are requiring more ready spaces than we would have under the current code. So it's less actually there, but more capable.
I have a
Yeah, please
follow-on to
continue,
that.
yeah.
So just in the practicality of, I don't know where it comes in. So if you're a private homeowner and you buy an EV, then you make your ready station ready. But whose responsibility is it in a commercial or a multifamily building to do those upgrades? It just seems like it could be a real gray area where there would be fingers pointed, well, the builder should have done it. Well, no, the management company should be doing it.
Yeah.
So,
So I think this is trying to strike a balance of current demand versus future demand is the way these are being structured. And then there's the city's role, and then there's the role of just the market forces. So I would say how we're trying to structure this is that we would be requiring a 5% upfront, so there'd be some level of spaces. And then when the market pressures were put onto the apartment operators, they would have to take that upon themselves. It wouldn't be a regulatory requirement, but the idea is that they would have the infrastructure in place so that it would be easier for them to do. I think what we find is that when people have to retrofit, it's overwhelming because you have to go to Excel and pay for upgrades of your whole service. So ideally, you're going to have an additional 25% of spaces that you already have the electrical capacity for. It's pretty easy to put in the new circuit and the wire. There's another 30% where there would be some expense, but so that's the idea. The regulatory process kind of gets you started, and then we're hoping the market forces will cause the rest of those to be put in.
Commissioner Mahaley.
So following up on Commissioner Baskett's example so would like a duplex, a two-family duplex, would that fall under, or could you show me where that falls under?
Yeah, duplexes are actually going to fall under the definition of residential building because they're considered single family.
Okay,
So these R2 occupancies are really when you stack units
yeah,
on top of each other. So anything that's a row home or a
Yeah.
single family home, duplex.
so the question that I'm driving towards is how is rounding accounted for? And thinking about her example of the multifamily, so like a row of townhomes, would that qualify? Or where would a row of townhomes, like Pheasant Run, where would that qualify?
Yeah, so those would fall under residential buildings.
Okay, so like only an apartment building would classify as the commercial building?
Yes.
Okay, and so if the commercial, if it has, so that would imply, right? So that only, if it's 15% for the 10 or less parking spaces, does that mean it only really triggers at 3 parking spaces? And how do you make sure that there are enough units there, in other words? Because thinking of everyone wanting to get an EV, if they only have, having it be a percentage, I feel like we should account for the number of units.
Yeah, that's another way to do
Yeah.
it. So there's language in the code. I'm going to have to pull it up. I'm pretty sure I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure we have language in the code that states that you round up.
Okay,
It might be, let me check it, because it might say that you round to the nearest number. So anyways, there is number in the code to guide on how you round. But yes, I think the idea, this is drafted, that you're not going to provide EV charging in an apartment complex for all users if it's built
Fair.
today. That's not the intent of it.
yeah, understood.
However, for row homes or single-family homes, you would be accommodating every single unit with a space.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question, but I think we should go somewhere else for.
Additional questions on this? Yeah, please, go ahead. Commissioner Hunt.
Just building on Commissioner Baskett's question about the EV ready and the obligations. What does EV ready mean? You just need to attach a charger to it?
Yes.
So that is like all the wiring is there. It looks like a plug.
Yes,
I think,
you would just
because
need
I
to
have
put
that
the
in
plug
my new rebuild is a plug, and you just have to buy a charger and stick it on.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
That's EV ready.
Well, it could be plug or it could be hardwired, though, probably, right? Is it?
Sorry, yeah, well, the wire's going to the space where you
Right.
would put the plug. So it's either going to be in a closed box, or you might have some other outlet there in the meantime. So it could be either. But at the minimum, you would just bring the wire to that space.
Right.
And,
You'd have a
just
live
put it in an
wire.
electrical box. Yeah.
Commissioner Bangs.
Okay, I got a couple of questions. Building on Commissioner Mahaley's question earlier, so you made it clear, 25% expansion would require compliance with this. So we've got a lot of big box retail that's empty. If somebody comes in and takes on one of those sites, they're not required to implement any of this in the parking lots.
That is correct.
Okay. Maybe stating the obvious, parking spaces doesn't necessarily correlate to units in apartment blocks.
That's correct.
Okay, so that could be a challenge.
Yes, yeah, and in different parts of the city, our code, most of the parts of the city, the base code is 1 parking space per bedroom in multifamily, just to give you an idea.
Okay.
So it's just a different type of standard, yeah.
Right. And then last question, you drew the comparison with Lafayette and Boulder. Do you anticipate that if and when the state changes this policy, we will deploy the same changes?
I think we could. I think there's a lot of unknowns with the EV future of where's the demand for parking. I think at the home is where we anticipate there'd be the most demand for sure. Most people are charging their vehicles at home, and if they have really long commutes, it's a convenience. It's a convenience for employees. But to answer your question directly, I don't know what'll happen. I don't know how long it'll take them to update their code. You know, at some point, the state could also make this a mandatory minimum code. Right now, it's not, but I could envision the state is looking at making some minimum. You know, the state recently requires now minimum energy conservation codes, so this could become a minimum code at some future point as well. If they make the minimum more than this, and they could make that, they could force municipalities to do those minimums. If they don't make it mandatory, it's really up to you all in the elected body.
Commissioner Choi.
Thanks for answering the questions, Director Zaccaro. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to how staff arrived at some of the language in the draft ordinance, specifically the sentence that says the EV charging stations shall be located in desirable and convenient parking locations will serve as an incentive for the use of electric vehicles. I'm specifically focusing on desirable and convenient and how staff defines those.
Yeah, so that's carryover language from the 21 ordinance. So I'm not exactly sure specifically, you know, how that language was developed by the staff that drafted it. But I would say from staff's point of view, where that helps us, because we're working with developers, let's say on PUD development, and the Planning Commission, City Council. So if we see a PUD or you see a PUD where they're putting all the electrical parking far off in a inconvenient space, we all as staff or the Planning Commission can say, hey, developer, that's not meeting our standards. You need to relocate those to, and it's not measurable, but I think it's more of a common sense standard that we could all apply and hold developers to.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baskett. Yeah,
Unfortunately, I think that the spaces do get tucked away in the least desirable areas. I did a long road trip with my dog, and what I found is the places I was walking my dog were the places that the charging stations were, like back against the curb where there was 3 foot of grass to the fence kind of thing. So just, I don't know if there's ways to shape that, because we're making a statement about our community by having the EV charging stations in predominant places. And I'm a big believer in EVs and watching the trends. I'm very excited to see the direction that things are going. I think as these become just part of our daily life, my friends are all excited they can go to Target and charge their vehicles there. I mean, so I think it's an amenity. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be too soft on saying you can put it wherever you want it. Would you be amenable to thinking about stronger language?
Yeah, we can, and I'd love to hear some suggestions too, because I mean, at least off the top of my head, and we could look at other codes and see what they've done. Kind of a prescriptive standard. I mean, we could say maybe within a certain number of feet of the entrance, of the door, on a commercial building.
Commonly in LEED building rating system, typically the standard is that you do them next to your ADA spaces. So that's going to be convenient, kind of that's a definition that's already been, drilled through. But here's another option though, is sometimes desirable space is one that has shade or protection from snow. So sometimes that structure might be built a little further out and still be considered desirable. So I think probably that's where some of that language comes from, was trying to squish in both of those, but curious what other people think. Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Hunt.
I don't have any specific thoughts on that, but I just want to make sure that we're understanding exactly what we're being asked to do here today, the scope, because from my understanding, all you're asking us to do to change from the previous ordinance is this chart. Is that correct, or are there other changes?
Yeah, we don't have any proposed changes, but if the commission had some other ideas that they would like to make as conditions of your recommendation of approval, or we could redraft something and bring it back. So yeah, it could be appropriate for you all to come up with a recommendation that we would add or change to this.
But as it stands now, like your recommendation is just to change this, so
Just to change these numbers, yeah.
So the applicability of, you know, to only new rebuilds and all that other stuff, that's already in the existing.
Yes, yeah, the
ordinance.
only thing we're
Okay.
changing is this. Everything else is staying the same with the existing ordinance.
Which includes the addition of the EV-capable light, right? So that's part of the
Yeah, there's a
addition,
new
yeah.
category added plus this
Yeah.
table. Yep.
To be clear, it's table 2, right? Table 1's already there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why 0? Is that just the model language?
That's in the model language.
yeah.
If it's 10 or less spaces, the model language says 0 installed.
Additional question, guess?
Director Zakaro, can you provide an estimate of just a ballpark average cost for the installation of an EV station at one of the kind of commercial building situations?
That's a really great question. I think we had those numbers in 2021. I might go back and look
Okay, okay.
and see what they were. It's really hard to say because there's definitely different scales. I mean,
Okay.
if you're building new,
Yeah,
and so it's hard to say because if you get above a certain amount of electricity that you trigger a higher amperage service, that's going to bring your cost way up.
I see.
So it's really hard to say on just a per space basis, but I'll see if we have any
Okay.
information because I think we did that research back in 21.
I think one of the other important aspects of that question is trying to retrofit, doing it after. If you have trenching and you're going under sidewalks and through parking lots, and that's going to be way more than
Yeah.
any of these, actually.
If you're not having to up your amperage, or if you're a commercial development, sometimes Excel will make you put in a new transformer or something even, and it gets really expensive. So, I'm going to say just to put the circuit breaker in and the conduit and the wiring and the plug itself is probably, maybe at most a couple $1,000s, depending on the length of the run and everything. So it's really where you get into the per unit cost. It's the electric service to the building. So that's where it gets really expensive, having to bring in a whole new electric service to, if you're a big commercial property and you're having to put in, 50 or 100 EV installed or ready spaces, it's bringing in that electrical service. That's going to bring the per cost way up above $1,000. It might be, I don't know, $5,000 to $10,000 per spot at that point, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious, I don't know if this is a fair question either, but building on that, are we going to get, as other commissioners mentioned, are we going to get commercial developers that are going to be coming in at 124% of wanting to build up to that threshold of where they wouldn't have to, if I'm remembering this right? Maybe I'm not.
Right. So some commercial builders won't make a big addition. They'll
Right.
keep their addition small. I mean, potentially, I don't think it'll be that cost prohibitive
Okay,
in this.
okay, that's
I wouldn't
helpful.
expect that.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
it's,
the cost at that point
Point
of
is not-
adding that
Okay.
compared to 25% of your footprint increase, you've got some money to spend.
Okay, yep.
To start with.
it'll be interesting to
helpful
see.
for
I mean,
me.
when we get, new multifamily development, if we get that, it'd be really interesting to see if they actually exceed some of these minimums. I'll be curious to see as new development comes in.
It's going to be an amenity. I mean,
It could
people are
be.
going to
Right.
want it. They're going
Yeah.
to want to be able to advertise, we have EV, because as you say, it's the wave of the future.
Yeah, we'll
That
hope.
actually raises a huge equity issue, right? Class A office space with white-collar workers may even offer that as an amenity to employees, where it would be potentially free charging. Other ones might have paid charging, and that's where the whole issue of multifamily really comes in, is people who don't have the ability to kind of control that at all.
Yeah.
So,
I think there is some thought in this world that, you know, in the world of planning for EVs, that eventually the market will hopefully take care of this and it won't have to be a regulatory requirement. You know, it'll just be desirable and demanded by the different users. That's a ways off right now, and that's why we are having minimum regulations to try to incentivize it.
well, and again, there too, right? I think with the apartment buildings, multifamily, that the market will take care of it to a degree for luxury, but for everybody else, that's same old problem, right? The market doesn't take care of those people, so. Commissioner Mahaley.
Two more quick questions, and thanks for bearing with me. The first one, I'm thinking about a mixed-use building, right? So something with like shops, restaurants on the ground floor, and then apartments or condos above it. Would that be treated the same? I think the answer is yes, but to verify, would that be treated the same as just a standard apartment building, full, you know, apartments ground floor up?
Yeah, so if we had a mixed-use building and we were applying this standard, when we do the parking calculation, we're gonna have a separate calculation for the commercial, even though it's in a single building.
Okay.
So and then, of course, the residences would follow the other ratio.
Okay, yeah, which I think is an important distinction and why I asked. Thank you. And the second one is this, just to, I'm not sure we know the answer, but this looks like an expansion of EV services, and I think that's where we're going. Does this represent a investment or upgrade to Louisville infrastructure beyond what Excel's already talking about doing?
Are you talking about just our base infrastructure in the city to bring electricity?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it sounds like something we'll want to do, but I just want to be deliberate about what this would entail.
Yeah, I mean,
We
that's-
have time. This will take a while to be appreciable, but I just want to make sure we know what we're signing up for.
Yeah, so there's a lot of,
That's a loaded question.
yeah, there's been a lot of questions, especially with our all-electric commercial code. Can Excel even accommodate if a significant amount of new development? They would have to expand their infrastructure. So it's also a question of retrofitting. Like, we're not retrofitting the rest of the city. This is just new development, which is a very small percent of our existing infrastructure. When when new developments actually come in, they have to bear the cost often of the Excel upgrades. And that's where I was getting to, you're not just putting in your electric panels sometimes, you're having to pay for the Excel infrastructure upgrades if it's a big residential development or a big new commercial development, that can be very expensive. Excel doesn't just bring that power to your property if it doesn't already exist there.
Thank you.
And standby fees and utility rate structure. Standby fees. So additional questions for Director Zaccaro at this time?
Chair, I have one more.
Yes, Commissioner Choi.
Director Zaccaro, in the definitions, again, the added definitions in the draft ordinance, both the EV ready space and the EV capable space define the minimum requirements for the service that would be brought to the space. And by the language that's in there, it would be in support of, at a minimum, a level 2 charger. But we don't have anywhere in here that I saw the definition of the minimum service level for what an installed space would be. Is that correct? Did I miss something, or is that something that's missing?
I don't know. Let me look in the ordinance. I think there might be some other definitions that exist in the ordinance. So the thing with the ordinance you see is you just see the changes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the whole ordinance. I think there might be a definition that exists in the code, but let me look that up maybe. If you have, I could do that now, or if you're going to deliberate amongst yourselves, I could try to
Sure,
look that
while
up.
we're discussing, that'd be great. And it looks like the draft ordinance that's brought in here has both existing deleted and added language in there.
Yeah, it might, okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing it, and it's nice to see the level 2 minimum service for EV ready and EV capable.
Yeah.
But we just don't, from what I'm seeing.
Could be an oversight and
it's
we
not
need
in
to
there.
add it. So let me check and see, because I do think, for example, the model state code has that in there.
That's my only other question. I have some stuff for discussion.
All right.
Thanks, Chair.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, yeah, if you can look that up, we'll open it up to public comment now. If anybody who, I see we have 5 people participating by Zoom and 1 call-in. If you want to use, raise your hand if you'd like to speak to this, or *9 on the telephone to virtually raise your hand. Not seeing anybody for public comment on this one. Okay. Maybe we can get this last little tidbit. So Director Zakara, it sounds like in any case, we want to make sure that that language is in there.
Yeah, we'll want to make sure that it has the level to do
Yeah.
support a level 2 charger. And I'll keep looking. If it's not in there, if you're comfortable, you could just make a condition that we verify that and add the definition if it doesn't exist.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Nice catch. All right, any additional questions before we close public comment? Yes, Commissioner Basket.
This is a little bit sideways, Director Zakarl, but this is an opening to bring it up. Do we have any requirements for electric bicycle charging?
No.
Do you know if other cities are doing that yet?
Potentially, but I'm not aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
I worked on a couple of projects on Westminster where it was required, but it was not an ordinance. It was just a condition that we put in for the developers. And especially the same kind of thing in multi-units where I think for wear and tear, it'd be better to keep the bikes in a bike corral or whatever, but that doesn't do you any good if you can't plug in your bike to charge it. So that might be something that gets added in at some point.
Very good point. I wonder if there is model language out there somewhere. Somebody must have developed it, I'm sure. But, all right, I will now close the public hearing, and planning commissioners will deliberate on the evidence presented. During deliberations, no further public comment or other testimony or evidence will be received. Where are people's thoughts at as of this moment in time? Who would like to begin? Anybody? Commissioner Choi.
I can start, Chair. Thank you. So in looking at Table 2, I had a couple of thoughts, and this is the proposed standards. For the non-R2 occupancies, the EV-ready spaces are identified as 2 spaces for parking lots with 10 or fewer parking spaces, and 8% of all spaces if they have greater than 10 parking spaces. Just running the scenarios in my head, if a parking lot has 10 spaces, they get 2 EV-ready. If they have 11 spaces, they get 1 space, 1 EV-ready space. So by adding an additional parking spot, you actually drop your EV-ready quantity or ratio when it's at that 8% level for, again, non-R2 greater than 10 parking spaces. I think in order to kind of maintain the standard, knowing especially with the EV ready, the cost differential of adding that infrastructure in during construction is, incremental. That I would prefer to see that instead of 8% up at about 20%, so that you don't lose any from the original 2 that you would have on 10 or fewer spaces.
Can we pull up the table on screen again? That would be helpful, I think.
So are you proposing language be added, say 2 spaces, 8% or at least 2 spaces, something along those lines?
For table 2 there, I would just change, so the EV ready space in non-R2 for 10 or fewer spaces can stay at 2 spaces. The EV ready for non-R2 with greater than 10 spaces would be 20% of all spaces, as opposed to the 8%. That would be something that I would be able to feel maintains the idea of it.
Can I ask a quick question, Commissioner Choi, about that?
Please.
And so then what would you make any changes to the EV capable and EV capable light percentages or would you propose leaving them?
If I understand the way the table is written,
The way it's written, you have to meet all of those
right,
for a single project, yeah.
right.
So if you're proposing 20% for,
Right, so that would by nature trump the EV capable and EV capable light. If you had 20% EV ready spaces, that would be inclusive of,
no, so the way it's
it would-
written,
it would then
you have to have 2%
added in.
plus
Oh, I'm sorry,
8%
okay, I
plus
misunderstood.
10%
Yeah.
plus
I
10%.
misunderstood. See, here's where I go back to, you know, you're adding 25%. The cost of conduit and copper is very minimal. And going back to your question earlier, on the most expensive, so if you were to put in a new dedicated service for one level 3 charger, and that's all you're going to put in, you'd probably add about $10,000 to your project, give or take,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So that's on the expensive side of things. When you start adding more on the same transformer or lower levels, the cost per space drops down with economy of scale.
Okay.
So, you know, and the majority of that cost of the $10,000, give or take, for a level 3 charger is almost exclusively in the charger itself, right? The infrastructure, the conduit, the copper, it's cheap in comparison, you know, to the whole ratio. So I don't know, and I guess my comment about the 20% misunderstood the table a little bit. Understanding that those would then be additional requirements. So I'm open to hearing other thoughts about that. I just, you know, in thinking about that transition from 10 to 11 spaces, the way it's written right now, you would lose an EV-ready space, which I don't think is the intent of the ordinance. So I'd like to find a way, you know, to avoid
Well,
that.
but I think
But
with
what
the
if we
difference,
went with a 15% to make it consistent with the others? Would that address, I'm not good at math, but would that address your concern somewhat?
the jump from 2% to 8% is not that jump because it's all in, because you have to do them all, right? So, because when you have greater than 10 spaces, then you have to actually have 2 installed. So plus an additional 8%, plus 10, plus 10. So I'm more focused on the zeros, but I'm curious what other people are thinking.
Well, I think, yeah, the point you're making is you build 11 spaces, you're not obligated to have an EV-ready space, right? So I think we do need to remedy that. Otherwise, you've got larger parking lots with fewer ready spaces. So the 20% solves that. The 15% wouldn't.
Director Zakara.
So I think if you had an 11 parking stall commercial development, so if you had a 10 parking stall development, you'd have 2 ready spaces. But if you had an 11 parking stall, you'd have 1 installed and 1 ready. Because of the, right? So you're basically,
Well, if
you don't have the 2 ready, but you have the installed, which is an upgrade to the ready, if that makes sense. I don't, plus.
Right,
then
because
you-
you're adding in you're forgetting the 2%, you know, because they would have to have an actual ready space, installed space.
Yeah, you'd have to have one installed, 1 ready, 1 capable, maybe 2 capable and 2 lights. 2 light spaces. Let me find the rounding language, because that's going to be
That would be
important to
helpful, yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
I'm pretty sure it's in here. Did you have
If it rounds up, that'd make it easier.
Yeah, so it says round up. So if you're at, if you had an 11 space parking stall, correct me if I'm wrong here on the math, you'd actually have to have 2 lights, 2 regular capable, 1 ready, 1 installed. So you'd go from 2 ready to, 6 spaces of different capabilities.
So to be specific about the rounding language, 1.1 rounds to 2.
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes you comfortable with transitioning from 10 to an 11 space parking lot.
So maybe I'm missing it, but 2% of 11 doesn't round
Is
up
one
to.
space.
It's one.
It rounds up to
one.
one
Rounds up to
space.
1.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay,
as
Yes.
does 8% of 11.
okay.
8% of 11 is one space.
Yeah. So you'd have. You want me to go through that again, or I think you all get it, right? Yeah.
I do, or at least I'm starting to, I think, but it is raising an issue for me about, is it a little too complex to, is this going to be something that is going to be a little challenging for applicants to understand? And I don't know that there's a remedy, but.
There's professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's not perfect, but I think the benefit of aligning with the state code, and one of the reasons we'd align with the state code is so that there is some standard, if more cities adopt this, there'll be standardization a little bit about how the cities are doing this.
All right. Any, additional deliberation? Thoughts?
Sorry, a
So, yeah,
couple other things on that, Chair. I do, before I make any statement about this, I think I do need to think about the percentages and the pragmatic, realization of what the rounding might be. I do think that when we make our statements about the ordinance, having a definition about installed being a minimum level of service for level 2 charger would be something that I think is necessary. And there was also a comment in the draft ordinance that talked about the availability of the chargers being operational during the normal business hours of the uses that it serves. And I wasn't quite sure why that was in there or what that would mean. I don't think we have any bad actors in town that would, shut off the breaker as they're closing up the door for the evening. But I do wonder about some of the language that's in here while we're talking about the approval of the whole ordinance.
Well, it sounds to me like in that situation where it's not necessarily a bad actor, but a business that's closed doesn't want to leave their charger available to somebody to charge overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the business owner, they have that right to do that, apparently. I don't know how much of it.
I don't think we'd want to be in the position of sort of like authorizing people to take people's, businesses' electricity outside of business hours.
Right. Now, it could be for a fee anyway.
Right.
Right, during the daytime when they're open. So at that point, I don't think there's any vendor who operates those systems that would allow it to be shut off because they're trying to maximize the purchase of that product. But if it's free, that's a little bit of a different issue.
Yeah, that's true. And I wasn't thinking about it. I was thinking about it from the perspective that most people, most instances and applications of this would likely be through a provider.
Okay, yeah. And again, my hunch is that, right, when there's a provider involved, that they want that thing on and available as much as possible. So where, to me, it would seem like the market would force that, probably, but I don't know if the language,
Yeah.
if we need to go further with it.
And just as a note, the draft ordinance does have a typo in it in Section 1, Part E, General Requirements 2B. for the record.
What's the type? Oh, you have it?
It's missing the word "that."
Thank you. And what are other people thinking about the different numbers? I mean, back to the EV ready spaces and the 8% number. 8 does stick out as a, well, I guess 8 and 2, right? They're not 10, 15, or 30.
I mean, here's where a challenge of scale comes, right? Because I'm thinking of like a, big box store, right? It has 100 spots, 8% versus 10% is appreciable. And,
Yeah.
so whether the remedy is to add some sort of logic in the language to classify, minimums, or whether it's another tier that's, between 10 or 100. I don't want to make it too cumbersome, but I wouldn't want to ratchet that up too much to make it much more beyond the surrounding areas we have. Because then it would be a pretty significant cost to build here versus somewhere else. So I do like that we're sort of in family with Boulder and our surrounding communities.
And I do think that there is value to aligning with state guidance on this. And there's a lot of value in that when we're, again, trying to be open for development here. And this is obviously a first step in trying not to get too far out ahead of demand. And hopefully, demand will take care of this eventually.
And that's, again, there where I come back to is on the multi-occupancy buildings, that 0, I think, should be 1 space.
Just to
Or
make sure,
5%.
just to make sure I'm
So
clear, Chair
commercial
Brana, so the
buildings,
commercial buildings are 2
2
occupancies.
And I'm wondering about the non-R2 occupancies as well.
And you're saying that if those installed spaces, if that should be,
Potentially 1
yeah, okay.
instead of 0. So 5% or 2%, whichever number. But I don't know what other people think.
You're talking about the residential buildings,
Both, actually
Right.
both at this point, commercial buildings non-R2, the commercial buildings, and commercial buildings R2, which are the multifamily, where we have 10 or less parking spaces, whether that should be, they should just, well, I guess we'd stick with the same numbers of 2% and 5% because those both represent 1 space.
I mean, I think that's fine. I think residential buildings, homes are a little bit different. I think
Right,
that-
I think that
I
should
just think
stay at
you
0.
just should stay at 0 because
I'm with you
you can
there.
always put your charger in there if it's ready.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify, Chair Brana? Where you're headed is you'd really like to see each of those, no matter how small your commercial building is going to be, it should have at least 1 installed EV space is kind of where you're, okay.
Yeah, I guess it does come down to good point.
Well,
Right, because how many, yeah,
But no, but
you have 2
I'm,
parking spaces, should you have 1 of them?
yeah, I mean, maybe so, maybe so. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Or maybe the number, well, except for the model ordinance says 10 or less. Yeah, I'm curious as to whether,
So I think you're thinking here, so maybe you would make this 1 and this 1. So you'd have 1 installed and 1 ready. So the total number of spaces stays the same, but you actually have a charger installed. Could be one way to do it.
yeah,
And then here you could do 1 and then maybe change this to 10%, which would probably get you the same total number of spaces, but 1 would actually have a charger in it in both scenarios.
that would be a clean solution or a clean way to approach it. I'm not dead set on this either. I'm curious what other people are thinking.
Chair, I'm looking for
Well,
language.
I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
I was going to say, how many commercial buildings, new builds, are likely to be built with 10 or less parking spaces?
Very few, that's a good point. I thought about that, but I also thought it's in the state code. But it is
What we
ours
might
too.
run into is an addition of 25% or more on some of our existing buildings that have on-site currently 3 or 4 parking spaces. And I'm thinking of downtown in particular, not McCaslin.
Right.
So would it muck things up for people downtown with additions? I still think it's a good thing at that point.
So that brings up another question, actually. So hypothetically, let's take the situation, 'cause to your point, like what if they built a small building next to a large building, like take the Coles area, right? Massive parking lot that's underused. Someone comes in and decides to build a small building, that if it were somewhere else in town would be 10 or less spaces. How would that work if it's next to or using a massive parking lot that's part of another wider complex?
Yeah, I think it would have its own PUD, and we would look at that on an individual basis and apply this. And they might have shared parking, but we'd require, we'd have a demand just for that use.
Carve out some level of, this building gets 10 spaces and it applies in this box, so you'd carve it out that way. So that Dave, Commissioner Bangs, I think is where you would run into this.
Well, I presume we have code that buildings of a certain size require a certain number of parking spaces.
Yes, we do. We've got a couple codes that have different formulas for that, yep.
Okay. Yeah, the only comment I would make, I think the general consensus seems to be, this is very few required spaces.
Well,
Given the momentum of EV adoption. It just, and it's the state code, so
Right.
it is what it is.
Right.
So I think getting the number right as much as we can, try to be prescriptive, is an appropriate effort, right? And not necessarily just shooting for the moon. Because I know firsthand how even a percentage-based allocation can be very difficult to meet from just an overall, construction perspective, as well as available electrical infrastructure. We have 2 feeders that come into the Louisville substation, and that serves the entire town. And if every building added 25%, we would quickly surpass Excel's available capacity in terms of just having the transformer sitting in the ground. So we do want to be diligent about how we identify what the perspective is. To that, on this table, and I was looking for it here in the draft ordinance, I don't see anywhere where it specifically states that these are minimums. I think it refers to it a couple times that these are the required spaces. So I do want to also make that clarification that, we like to have faith that all of our developers are well-intended and that these would be minimums so that they wouldn't, put in one installed space and one ready space and one capable space and one, capable light space, but they could kind of do the best for what the development is.
The state code actually has some language, and I didn't bring it into this ordinance for the sake of simplicity, but it basically says that if you put in, 20% installed spaces, then that you actually get more credit than,
right.
Yeah.
And it's even, you could reduce the number. It's not even 1 for 1. It's like for every installed space, I think you get to reduce your capable spaces by 2 and things like that.
And I think that type of language could be very useful because, again, when you're going through the process of planning and implementing a development, and you are running conduit and copper and buying, charging stations, right? The economy of scale says maybe we want to do this, and then you get credit for the other stuff that really doesn't have a lot of value add at that point.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, I think we would absolutely interpret this to be a minimum code, and we certainly wouldn't prohibit more, but we don't have an incentive like the state code has in it.
Yeah, along those lines. So let's think of the example for the R2 occupancies, a 10-spot building, right? So the way I read the table as written, 15% of spaces means 2, so 2 EV ready, 1 EV capable, 1 EV capable light. So of the 10, 4 would have to be in those categories. If the builder would go and say, well, I don't really want to do 1 capable or 1 capable light, I just want to make 4 EV ready, I think that's a great trade. I think they should be able to do that. I wouldn't want us to say, well, that's great, you can do 4, but you still need to have the capable one ready. We're almost penalizing them for doing more, and I think we should have language to have it be that's trading up for us. I would say, great, if you want to do 4 ready instead of 2, 1, and 1, I think we should let them do that. I think we should encourage that, frankly.
Yeah, and that's easy language to add to the code if we just do a simple, it's that the capable light, capable, and ready are also minimums. And so if you replicate that number with an actual installed, we can put language in there that says that
I think that
takes
would be
care of
great.
that.
Yeah, very important catch. I guess with that then, I think I'm backing off from the non-R2 occupancies and saying that for the multifamily, that 0 with 10 or less parking spaces should be 5% just to match the. No, so for the multifamily, is that the?
This
Yeah,
right here?
Right. So that any new multifamily that has 10 or less parking spaces provides at least one actual charger. And that's kind of back to my concerns about equity. I mean, who knows, but yeah, that's where I would be at with it for now. I'm curious what other people think. And within the 2 other conditions, one is that we confirm that it's the tier 2, and then that we do this trade-up allowance.
Yep.
3 conditions. What are other people thinking? Any further deliberations? With those as
I
conditions?
was just, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I appreciate the discussion. It's very helpful for me, and I'm in support of where we're headed here, I think, so.
All right. Well, kind of work our way down the line. Can we start with those as 3 conditions? How do you feel about?
So are we moving towards a vote or further comment, or?
Well, yeah, we're moving towards a vote, but we got more comments. That's
Can I
fine.
make one
Go
more
ahead.
comment? And this
Yeah.
might be counter to the direction we've been headed with this conversation. I actually don't see, with the addition of the EV-capable light category, I don't actually see a lot of value in the EV-capable category remaining in the table. And I'll say why. The EV-capable space says you have to have your conduit, it has to be sized for wiring, and it has to have space in your panel for another breaker. And that's it. And I can see a lot of scenarios where somebody pays for the conduit, lays it under the ground, doesn't put wire in it or pull wire from the panel, has space in the panel that gets looked at and signed off on during inspection, and then next thing you know, they want to put another, warming table or fryer or something else in the kitchen, and they use that circuit, which doesn't violate code because you have the space in the cabinet, in the panel, and you go through it, and then you essentially just lose that EV-capable space, and it's kind of an abandoned asset of, the conduit, or if you pulled copper through the conduit. If you have the EV-capable light, you've got the conduit laid under the pavement, run out to spaces, and that's the majority of the rework. Because if you're going to upsize your panel, to put in spaces, you're doing it when you're doing some other renovation, and then you're going to trigger the installation of either ready or installed spaces. So just in terms of trying to make it less onerous for developers, again, if there are these domino requirements that say you have to have this and this and this and this, right? Because you haven't essentially traded up or done that value add, I think that category actually adds a little complexity to it that doesn't add a lot of value.
I guess where I'm comfortable with it is just basing on the model language, and that this allows it to be tested kind of throughout the state, and see where those end up going and why. Director Zucchero?
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts about that. I think the value of requiring the panel space and the service is that if somebody wants to upgrade, that's the most cost prohibitive part of the upgrade, is bringing in the new service. So yeah, there is probably some scenario where somebody might start using that capacity, but that might be unlikely, but it's hard to say. It's speculative, but I have seen in some code language, it might be in the state code, if we were concerned about that, we could add to the definition of capable that you have to label the space
reserved.
as reserved for future. So that's another solution, is to add that to the definition.
And I think that would address exactly what my anxiety about that would be.
Okay, so that could be another condition, is we change the definition to say it's labeled as reserved for future for the capable.
Does that really achieve it, though? I mean, if I want to install my cotton candy making machine and I need to pull power from that panel, I'm not going to upgrade the panel when it's just sitting right there. I'm going to peel the label off. Oh, whoops, I blew my plan.
I think there's all kinds of scenarios where
Yeah.
people could get around the code, so I think if we kind of go, I hate to
Yeah.
use this, it's the overused term of the perfect's the enemy of the good, so that might be,
Do you like,
Might be a
do you
way
like
to do it.
labeling?
I do,
That's
you know,
good for me.
I'm also a
Alright.
fan of, you know, locks only keep honest people out, so, you know.
All right, yeah. So is that a fourth condition then?
I would add that
Yeah.
to the mix, yeah.
Come up with that language? All right. Additional deliberations, and at this point, where is everybody standing on it? So yes, moving towards a vote, but how are you feeling?
Feeling good, thanks.
Okay, good, glad to hear it.
I've made comments before about being in line with the surrounding communities and not representing a onerous burden compared to from a competitive landscape perspective. I was initially concerned thinking of vacant large box stores in our community and having this become another deterrent for refilling that. So I'm happy that it only applies to renovations of 25% or larger. That's I think a very important distinction here.
So to be certain, that's a renovation that includes an addition.
And a renovation with new space. So if you just take
Doesn't
a
even standard
if you just take a
renovation-
shell and redo the surfaces, this doesn't apply.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I've made all the comments
all right.
I need to make.
Commissioner Choi. I'll just work our way down here, so.
I think I've said my piece, Chair. I appreciate it. I would be in support of the ordinance with the amendments as proposed.
Commissioner Basket.
I'm also in support with the conditions suggested.
Marlene.
Same.
Hunt.
I am as well, and again, I want to reiterate, I think there's value in following the state guidance on this, given where we are in the life cycle of the market for EVs.
Commissioner Bangs.
Yep, I'm in support, particularly the stacking incentive, so to speak, to give developers a real incentive to create actual EV charging stations, because it'll be interesting over time to see how many of these ready spots ever actually evolve to charging stations themselves. That's an unknown, but it's a concern.
So I'm also in favor of it at this time. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Chair, I would move to approve Resolution Number 1, Series 2024, resolution recommending approval of an ordinance amending Louisville Municipal Code Section 172170, electric vehicle charging infrastructure with proposed amendments.
4 conditions, and you've captured those. Great.
Can we review those right now, just to
Yeah,
make sure they're
yes.
make sure they're complete?
Yes,
Thank you.
please go ahead. No, so we've got the one that confirms that Tier 2,
Level 2
charging.
installed.
That we have, gosh, I rattled them off earlier. What are they?
The
Was one
change,
changing the percentage to 5% instead
Right.
of 0
Yeah,
in the
for the multifamily, yep.
multifamily, right?
And for the,
the change that the value adds are inclusive of the lower value options.
Correct,
And
yep.
the labeling
labeling.
of the reserved
Yep.
circuits for future use.
perfect. Thank
I'll
you.
second that motion.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Mahaley,
Yes.
Commissioner Choi,
Aye.
Commissioner Basket,
Yes.
Commissioner Mullane,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Bangs,
Yes.
and Chair Brown Eyes.
Yes. Thank you for your work on that. Why don't we take a 6-minute break, returning at 7:50.
Recording stopped.
think so, yeah, let me, 1 second.
Recording in progress.
Great, if we can call the meeting back to order, please, with a presentation on the comprehensive plan update.
Okay, so I'm Jeff Hurt. I'm the planning manager in community development and the city's project manager for the comp plan update. So our purpose here tonight is really just to introduce the project. Really the first time we've come before Planning Commission on this really big, important project. So for tonight, it's really just about getting sort of a shared understanding of what a comp plan even is. And particularly with 3 new planning commissioners, we thought it was a good way to do it. And so we'll talk a little bit about the process planned, keep it kind of high level for tonight. We do have our consultants on the Zoom, so we're going to introduce them shortly, and they'll tell you a little bit about their team and some of their great background they bring to the project. We do have some sort of early targeted questions for you to inform our next steps, but I'll get into this in a minute, but this is the first of many conversations we're going to have with you on this, so we're just getting started. So I have a few slides, about 10 minutes here, on what a comp plan is. Basically, it's mostly a land use, transportation, and infrastructure city council adopted policy. It is required by state law and our city code to be updated every 10 years. We are at that 10-year mark right now. It is a policy document, so it doesn't in itself like change zoning or anything like that or change any rules. But it has probably more teeth than a lot of people realize. I'm kind of happy to talk about what that means.
If you go full screen with the slides, will that work?
Let me see here.
I don't want to slow things down, but
I'm not sure where. Usually there's a full screen option.
was it play show or?
This is from a PDF.
Oh, okay.
So
That's great.
sorry, is this
Let's
okay?
roll with it,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay. Our consultants will probably do a better job than this, the visuals. So some of the typical parts of a comp plan, and this isn't an outline of what it's going to look like, but there will be an existing conditions report. That'll be sort of a thorough analysis of all things sort of built environment related or land use and development trends and over time and things of that nature. And then I'll talk a little bit about the other components here. If I can get there. Not sure why it's not letting me advance now. Okay. So the vision and values, there'll be a vision and values chapter or section of the plan. This could be guiding principles, it could be a number of things. But this is a really important part of the plan that's going to be heavily driven by community input. So when you start seeing our first sort of community engagement, you'll see a lot of questions that get at sort of these values questions. What's most important to you? And a lot of the policies that are developed will hinge on those values. And so for each of these slides, I have some examples of how these portions of the plan would be actionable in terms of your decisions and the city's decisions. So vision and values can be a great lens for a variety of things. But they can be used for budgeting. So city council could use this for some of their budgeting purposes. They could use it for their strategic planning. You can use that as a lens for a variety of decisions, and sort of happy to circle back on that. I don't know, I'm going the opposite direction now. All right, so the land use framework part of the plan will be one of the sort of the biggest parts of the plan and will garner some of the most community input, we imagine. So this is where we'll envision a map, a future land use map, sort of our desired future from a land use pattern standpoint. And then there'll be policies underneath that sort of define what all these land use categories mean and things of that nature. But in terms of how this actually becomes actionable, there's a number of different ways, and we're happy to talk more about this, but certainly as you see, PUDs come in, rezonings come in, private development requests, we have it codified to evaluate those against this plan. So we would pull up this plan and say, so if somebody wants to go from residential to commercial, we would look to this map and say, is this part of the vision, things like that. It also can really help us with changes to our zoning code. We tend to, as a lot of cities do sort of a patchwork set of updates over time. And so this is a great opportunity to sort of establish a vision for what do we want our rules to look like, what are some of the principles around that. And so it can really lead us to, in this case, we imagine a lot of zoning code changes would come after the comp plan. So there's a huge range of uses for this part of the comp plan.
Sorry
Going the wrong way again.
to
Okay.
interrupt again. Also,
Yeah.
is Allison, is she on the consultant team?
Yes,
Okay, she
Jessica
has a
and
hand
Al.
raised. I don't know if she was trying to get through to
Oh,
you.
okay.
Maybe
I don't
we
know.
can open her mic briefly and see whether she wanted to comment on something to support you in this effort, perhaps?
She's just wanting to get in so that we can help give our presentation in a moment, so.
Okay. Great. Sorry to interrupt then.
Oh, no, you're good. So our clerk should have promoted you to panelist, Jessica, and hopefully Allison too. Is that okay? So when we switch, you all should be able to, it might be a little clunky, but we'll get there.
Great.
Thanks. Okay, so the transportation part of the comp plan will also be a really important piece of it, and it'll tie closely to the land use piece. So this is where just envision a map of all of our existing facilities, but also desired future facilities around everything related to transportation, walking, biking, driving, transit. We did a transportation master plan, as you may be aware, in 2019, which has been well received. So we'll look to build off of that, but we want to bring it into this plan. And so there's a wide range of ways this is actionable. Again, with private development that comes in, we want to look at this and say, you know, is there a connection that's really important for this development that we want to get as part of the private development proposal? It can be helpful for looking at street design standards, things of that nature, CIP planning, all kinds of uses for this part of the plan. And then there'll be a whole host of sort of policy statements around different topics. We don't know yet what those are. But here are some of the ones that we expect to be front and center. And it's important to note, this is a comprehensive plan. We're not going to do a deep dive on all of these things, right? This is such a huge range of topics. So a lot of these things have better sort of homes and other adopted documents through other departments and other efforts. But the comp plan can at least sort of reinforce some of those policies and make sure that they're aligned with this land use and development framework. And so there's always going to be active related parallel city projects. And so here's just a few of them that are sort of top of mind right now. PRO stands for Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails. They're going to be doing an update to their master plan here soon. We're actively talking with the parks folks about that, how we can align those two efforts. There's work being done in the downtown area in terms of the vision plan, which is more about the public sort of streetscape aesthetic and design. That will need to integrate with this as well, as will the housing plan, which we'll bring before you soon. We're working towards adoption on that. Happy to talk about how that kind of syncs up with the comp plan. But there's a lot of moving parts, and the point is all these things need to talk to each other. Community engagement will be critical at this. This is, one of the most important components of a successful comp plan update. So we've got 3 engagement windows, as we're calling them, proposed with this project. The first one being around vision and values, which is where we're starting with now. And then later in the summer, we'll talk about this with our schedule here in a moment, there'll be a series of, we don't know what these are yet, we want them to be driven by community input, but we imagine there'll be some key choices in front of the community in terms of land use options, more granular looks at specific areas of town, things of that nature, trade-offs, those kinds of conversations. And then the draft plan itself will have an engagement window. Engagement types, happy to talk more about this, but the overall overarching principle of this is to meet people where they're at in terms of giving people flexibility to engage however is most helpful for them. So whether that's open houses, in person, virtual, intercept events, we're gonna try to go to some places where people are already meeting and get in front of them. And so there's a number of different things we're doing, including, of course, checking with Planning Commission throughout and City Council. We're also doing sort of a full tour of all of our boards and commissions right now, introducing them to the project. I think we're going to eight boards and commissions over the last month and this month. So it's a full-on blitz of engagement that's happening with this project, as it needs to be. Our project structure, and this is what I'll turn it over to our consultants to introduce them here in a sec. Our project structure has City Council, of course, as the adopting authority of this. Planning Commission does have a codified role in the city code as the recommending body to City Council. So your role is going to be critical and sort of, as a sort of an oversight guidance body. So we'll be coming to you quite a bit for this project. I mentioned in parallel, we'll go into other city boards and commissions. We've also initiated a lot of conversations as focus groups, sort of topical focus groups around different subject areas, transportation, land use development, equity, diversity, inclusion, all kinds of groups that we've been engaging with. Happy to talk about that as well. We do have a city project management team that's interdepartmental to make sure all these efforts are talking to each other. And then we've got a fantastic consultant team led by Design Workshop. And I'm going to let them go ahead and introduce themselves and give a little overview of their team and what they bring to the table. So I will attempt to switch over here. If Jessica, you and Allison are ready. And Ben, do I need to switch it over to you so that they can share their screen? Okay. So, this works. Okay, there she is. You can take it away, Jessica. We can all see you in here.
Great, thank you so much. Jeff, do you want us to run through the slides that we have? I can't screen share right now, but I'm happy to do that if you'd like.
That would be great, yeah, but you can't screen share?
It says it's disabled for me right now.
Okay, I thought we had done that. All right, bear with us, sorry.
No problem.
While you're doing that as a backup, I'll try to find your slides you sent to us earlier and I can advance them. Oh, you're becoming a co-host now.
Okay, great, there we go. Thank you so much. Let me know if you can see my screen now.
We can see it, thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Jessica Garrow. I'm a principal with Design Workshop, and we are really excited to be with you tonight to talk about the comprehensive plan, introduce you a little bit to our team, some of the experiences that we have, and then we're eager to hear your comments and questions. I am going to turn it over to Allison Cody, who's our project manager, to run through the first few slides.
Hello, all. It's great to meet you virtually. I'm Allison. As Jessica said, I'm the project manager for this project. My background is in landscape architecture, urban design, and planning. So I really love comprehensive plans because I get to bring a broad spectrum of skills together. Joining our team is Riley Timmons, who is really fabulous at public engagement and is helping to guide and direct how we approach engagement and how we get really creative and have fun meeting with your community where they are and learning from them to help guide this process forward. Comprehensive plans are by nature comprehensive, and so therefore we are joined by a really great team of sub-consultants. Connor Merrigan and his team with Spirit Environmental will help on the open space, recreation, as well as really looking at this plan through a lens of sustainability and all the different aspects that ties into your community. I loved the conversation on EV charging earlier. Connor would have loved it too. We have Carly from Fair and Piers, longtime partners. They've worked quite a bit in Louisville. We're involved in some past plans there, and they bring the expertise of transportation. And then finally, rounding out our team is EPS, and Rachel and her team really bring that lens of the economic side of comprehensive planning. So understanding what growth projections look like so that we can get into some scenario planning that looks at potential futures that are based in data and really well informed to the future possibilities that could happen on the 10-year planning horizon. So at Design Workshop, we are guided by our principles of legacy design, which is community, environment, art, and economics. And I think especially in comprehensive plans, these are really core to how we approach the work. At the heart of everything is community. We recognize that this is a plan for all of you. And central to that is the economy and the environment and how that interplays with future land uses, transportation systems, open spaces, and ensuring that we're thinking about realistic projections for the future, as well as supporting the economy so that you have a thriving future in Louisville. And finally, the arts, which I think is just kind of the icing on the cake. It's what makes Louisville special. It's that character, it's that vibe that I think you guys have, and can continue to grow through this effort. Next slide. I think I touched on a lot of these. This is where I pass it over to Jessica. She's going to share a little bit more about Design Workshop.
Great, thanks, Allison. So a little bit about Design Workshop. Allison and I are based in our Colorado studio, and we have 8 studios across the country, so can pull on lots of expertise as we need, but have a Colorado-based team for this work out of the Aspen and Denver studios. We wanted to talk just a little bit about some of our recent experience, as well as experience from our sub-consultants. So this slide just shows some of the projects that the Design Workshop team has worked on over the last about 5 years in the metro area. So wanted to highlight maybe 4 specific areas. We've done a lot of work in Boulder County, City of Boulder, Town of Erie, and then also with Adams County and Arapahoe County, supporting them on things like economic development, land use codes, open space, and parks and recreation plans. Looking a little bit more broadly, these are 3 specific plans that Allison and I have worked on, supporting Mesa County in their comprehensive plan, the City of Provo in a comprehensive plan that then also turned into a conservation and resilience plan, and with the town of Telluride. So we love comprehensive plans. We are really excited to work with you and the Louisville community on yours. Fair and Peers is a frequent collaborator, as Allison said, and they have a significant amount of experience specifically within Louisville, and you can see some of those projects here on the screen, and they're really pulling from that expertise and experience as they dig into existing conditions and opportunities related to transportation and transit. They also have extensive experience in comprehensive planning throughout Colorado, just 3 examples, and we really enjoy working with them on the comprehensive plan. Spirit Environmental, also based in the Denver area, and have a lot of experience working on sustainability and resiliency. Connor Merrigan is the lead principal from Spirit working with us, and in his prior career, he did work on the City of Louisville's Energy Action Plan, and so also brings a really deep set of understanding for the city. And then finally, EPS is supporting on our economic aspect. They will also be coordinating based off of the findings from the ongoing housing study to make sure that they're not duplicating any effort, but building off of the latest information that the city is pulling together. But they have lots of experience up and down the Front Range working on master plans, comprehensive plans. So that's just a taste of our team. Again, we're really excited to begin to dig in on the various engagement windows, and we're wrapping up some existing conditions work right now that we'll be able to share with you in March. So with that, Jeff, I think we'll turn it back to you, and happy to answer any questions when the time's right.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, we're really lucky to have such a great team. They're them and their sub-consultants are really well known regionally and nationally for this type of work. So very fortunate to have them. I just have a couple more things, and I want to sit back and listen and answer questions that you all have. Gone the wrong way again. So schedule, this is very high level, abbreviated schedule, but target about an 18-month process. Our target adoption date is mid to late 2025. We talked about these engagement windows. We're in the middle of and sort of starting the first engagement window. We do want to engage during the warmer months. We recognize that's when people are most out and about. Council kind of agreed with us. So we are planning to go back in late summer for another engagement window. And then, yeah, like I said, planned aspirational adoption mid to late 2025. So that concludes our presentation. Thanks for listening to all that again tonight. It was just about sort of getting a baseline understanding of what a comp plan is, initial questions, introductions, things like that. We are planning to come back to you at your March meeting, actually, and have the consultants facilitate more kind of roll up your sleeves, interactive discussion about vision and values as the plan. So we thought it'd be good to do sort of back to back tonight, get in the headspace for tonight, and then come back to you in about a month and dive into things a little bit more. So our 2 questions for tonight are basically pretty simple. What does success look like to you for this project at this stage based on your understanding? And then if you want to, however you want to do this, kind of identify the top 3 issues that you think are most important to you as part of this plan. But happy to answer any questions at a different level. What is a comp plan? Why are we doing this? Or if you want to stay in this lane, happy to do that. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I would kind of jump on the first question here of what does success look like? I think it has to reflect the community desires as an outcome. I think it has to be understandable. All right, so when you page through it once it's released, that people who've participated in it, people who have not participated in it especially, can just kind of, it's an approachable document and understandable, and that it's also actionable for the planning department, that it gives you the tools and the language that the planning department needs to be able to put it to use to reflect those community desires. A few of my thoughts, but if other people have ideas.
Carol, make a comment. I think it's a great team. Kudos to the city for selecting the consultant group to do this stuff. I know they have a lot of chops coming in and a lot of history doing this work. I agree with you. I think usable, actionable, salient. You know, I think the good approach that the city takes every 10 years to updating this provides the opportunity to really look at what's next, not what we did. And I think engaging, citizens as well as the boards and commission of the city from that perspective of trying to figure out, what the important things are for what's next, and focusing on that's successful to me.
Thoughts? Or if you had any lingering questions of the consultants or staff.
I just have a question on timing. So this is essentially a 2-year project, but you also mentioned the housing plan is underway in parallel. So what's the timing of the housing plan and what trumps what, so to speak, in terms of the output?
Yeah, they need to talk to each other for sure. The housing plan, we're hoping to get a final draft before you as soon as March, might be April. Council adoption target for us is, I would say, May for that. And so from the housing plan, we can talk about this at length. We'll start with the concise version. The housing plan and the comp plan will both be city council adopted documents. So they'll both have kind of equal weight in that sense. The housing plan will have specific recommendations that will, I think, segue into the comp plan nicely, and we're doing it deliberately in that sense. So for example, the housing plan will likely call for looking at land use changes in certain areas of the community to allow for more residential, just because we underuse commercial areas, for example. That's projecting a bit, but I think, so in those types of land use changes have a home in the comp plan. Like the housing plan won't say change the land use at this location, the comp plan will though. So there's a thread there, and there's another of other sort of threads, but housing plan first, comp plan after.
And I just wanted to add to that, we've had some discussions with city council that they want to look at some action items coming out of the housing plan that we would implement this year and not wait for the comprehensive plan. So there will be some things identified as higher priority that we'll try to work on this year, and maybe into next year as we're adopting this. And then there might be some longer vision, more more intense things that we try to accomplish that we also put in the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
Thanks again for the great presentation. I'm looking forward to this process. I have one question. The concept of the 3 mile, kind of looking beyond 3 mile beyond the city limits. And I guess my question is, do we, I think, in some communities, there might be a lot of different things that could be happening in the 3 miles beyond the city limits. I'm not so sure that's the case for us. We're pretty locked. And so I'm just curious if that is a place where we feel like we need to spend some time and effort, or if it could be used somewhere else. So just thoughts on that. And maybe it's, instead of 3 miles, maybe it's a more regional, what are some of the other regional things in our area that are going to impact the town? And maybe, I'm just curious as sort of a question, I guess. I hope that's a question.
I don't know. I don't know if we haven't discussed that yet, exactly how we're going to tackle that. Rob, Jessica, feel free to chime in with how you've done it in other communities.
Yeah, I think there's a very limited area that we'll have to address within that 3 mile plan. I think we should look at the surrounding. There are some things we should maybe consider, but it's probably not going to be as extensive as a city that's considering a lot of future annexations.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that it's just it's not going to be maybe as broad as some other communities that have more land that they can annex and develop out to, but it will relate to, in all likelihood, our future land use map, frameworks around where transportation improvements should happen, and so we will want to make sure that there is a kind of that through line when we're talking about growth and where that should happen, both within the city of Louisville and within the 3 mile planning area, knowing it's probably not fully 3 miles. It's probably closer in.
Thanks.
Additional thoughts on the first question? So the second question of, what was it, boil it down to 3 issues, essentially?
Yeah. What does success look like to you, and your top 3 issues that jumped out at you? And you can do whatever you want with that. It can be housing affordability, or you can go more granular than that. I think we're open to however you want to take this. Yeah.
I have more than 3 sentences.
Fire away.
But I'd open it to anybody who wanted to, if anybody wants to jump on that initially, or. And for the people who are participating by Zoom, we will be asking you to join in a little bit here. Or phone, yep, go ahead.
So on the top 3 items, I think agreement around growth, that's pretty bold to think we could come up with that, but that's one of the things. Agreement around future land use, if any modifications are called for, and areas for focus and investment.
So I can jump in, agreeing on the growth part, and also from the perspective of how do we address affordable housing. And in particular, when it comes to affordable housing, I think this will be a spirited debate about how we can do that and the changes we can make with zoning and other land use to address affordable housing while also trying to preserve, the character of our city. And, and part of the discussion is, what is the character of our city? What should it be? And how do we preserve that while addressing affordable housing? And tied to that also, I think transportation, if we are growing and if we are addressing affordable housing, how do we address the transportation infrastructure and plan for it?
I was interested to see, right, so in sustainability, typically we look at economic, social, and environmental, that kind of umbrella over everything. To see art brought up to a 4th pedal in that was different to see. For me, from the social areas, I think DEI or EDI or EID is a kind of an overarching thing that needs to be kind of woven throughout. And then more immediately, though, one of the top issues is housing, clearly, and affordability within that. Beginning with the do we want more, if yes, where and what type, how and where and when, and how does affordability get addressed within that. Economically, I think right while we're working on the downtown vision plan, that's being addressed on a certain level. I would hope that we could try to think of how can we take a different approach to ongoing development, redevelopment of the McCaslin corridor. Not just be stuck in the reactive space of this is what they proposed and how can we move forward from there too. So
Yeah, and on that point, how can we inject mixed use possibly and other changes to help support the revitalization effort?
Right, whatever it takes. So for environmental, carbon / energy, they're pretty closely intertwined. Water and potentially solid waste at some point, but it's kind of how I saw a lot of those issues breaking down. So.
Yeah, I think while there was a quick nod to the other parallel efforts that the city is undertaking, I hope that, especially in the context of community engagement, we can use the right vernacular, since parallel lines never meet. And, you know, the housing study, the downtown development, right? All of those things, like, it's great to see the economic, like the economic side of the consultant team coming to bear on this. Because while we absolutely have to focus on things like the affordable housing, you know, creating the economic structures in the long-term comprehensive plan to reinvigorate the economic vitality of the commercial space of Louisville, especially in combination with those other plans, is vitally important. So,
Yeah, I think the watchword for me is going to be balance, because affordable housing, absolutely, the McCaslin corridor, absolutely, transportation, but there's going to be a trade-off between aspiration and affordability overall, right? There's a lot of wonderful things we could look for, but then we have to have the economy to support that or fund that. So
Yeah.
that's going to be the balancing act. I'll be interested to see as we go through that plan.
The thoughts? Yeah, please go ahead.
I feel like everybody's said all the things. You know, I think affordability and economic development and all these things, balancing that is going to be really important. I'm curious as to how, you know, we always had this out on the horizon, this potential for the train, and if, you know, if that is something that's going to be woven into this at all, or if it's even realistic to think about it. But some of us don't want to let it go. So, but yeah, I agree with all the priorities everyone else has said are really important.
Yep, please.
I would just say, it's, again, great discussion, really have appreciated hearing everybody's thoughts. I would add one thing, just like a continued attention to kind of the public and civic realm and like the kind of the livability of the city, places in the city that are really still pleasant to walk in, and just some good attention to that pedestrian scale, I guess.
Any other top 3 issues? I'd like to open it up to public discussion, a little bit more informal here. If you're on Zoom, I see a couple of raised hands and the phone call raised hands. Why don't we begin? I believe it's Ms. Krantz. We get to welcome back to the discussion. Thank you. If you can do tomorrow.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. This is Tamar Krantz. I live in Louisville. To the new commissioners, welcome, and thanks for donating your time to the community. And staff, Jeff, thank you for finding design consultants. I listened to their presentation to council as well, and I feel really impressed. And planning commissioners, I love your discussion so far, but I'm going to use my time to just add 2 new quick thoughts. The first one is about your role, and the second is about the questions that were just posed to you in the packet. I wanted to add something additional. Regarding your role, I'm wondering if you would consider an advisory committee to work on the high-level perspective on the comp plan and on community engagement. And this is my thought. You have many other duties, and your input is going to be really important in the later phases of translating the community vision into the framework and the policies of the final plan. An advisory committee could help the public to understand what you already understand and how it works. The city initially was considering an advisory committee, and I understand that they've put that role onto you. Just so you know, we have a stakeholder group for the decarbonization plan, and I think the same should be done for the comprehensive plan. It could only help to improve community engagement. I also agree with what Jeff said, that you have a codified role, but the language in 17.64 doesn't require that you play the central role, nor does it preclude a separate committee. So I hope you'll recommend that to increase public engagement. And my second comment is I'm really enjoying hearing your responses to the two questions that were posed. One thing I would hope that you would discuss is the value of having statistically valid surveys as part of what you consider to be a successful plan, so that you can ensure that you're really hearing from the public and not summaries. And also, regarding a successful plan, I have a concern about the projects that inform the plan. I'm concerned that the Prost plan doesn't include enough emphasis on open space and wildlife. So I know you might know that there's an advocacy group that's out recommending that the city consider a separate RFP and a separate plan to draw on experts in prairie and riparian resource management and ecology to boost the role of open space in the Prost plan. Because I don't feel like you'll have that to inform your comprehensive plan. So I have a question. This is more than a question than a comment. I love that the scope of work for this consultant includes an environmental assessment, but I'm really having trouble understanding the role that this EA has in informing the comp plan. It seems really ambitious. So I would like to hear a discussion on how this environmental assessment fits in. And as you know, there's been a few management plans for some open space properties, but the open space master plan hasn't been updated till 2004. So that's my question to you, is I hope you can find a way to incorporate this environmental assessment or an alternative RFP to boost the importance of open space in the Prost plan that's going to inform the comp plan. And then second, I hope you'll consider an advisory committee. Thanks for taking my question and my comment.
Thank you. We have somebody with a phone number ending in 226 with a hand raised.
Hi there. This is Sherry Summer. I live in Louisville. I've really enjoyed this discussion about the EV charging stations. I just feel really honored to be part of a community with such great residents. And I want to include Tamar Krantz in that. I love your comments, Tamar. Thank you. I feel great that Jeff Hurt is going to lead this. And thank you, Jeff, for your choice of this consultant. So that's all. I feel very positive about all those things. If I were to be asked questions about what I'd like to see, I would really like to see you take a systems approach and that you consider social, fiscal, and environmental sustainability as you look at these decisions. I was really encouraged that one of our new commissioners, Mr. Mahaley, is a systems, that's his job, I guess, is to analyze systems. And that's very, very important because it can be easy to do something good, like, oh, we all want more affordable housing or whatever. But as Commissioner Bang suggested, we may not be able to do all those things. We need to think of the implications. When the question was asked of what makes our town special, I can tell you I ran for mayor and I knocked on every door with the help of a teammate. And it was very uniform what people said that they loved. They loved ease of getting around. They loved the small community. They said they didn't want to be like Boulder. And they wanted Louisville to stay itself and not some other community, not Longmont, not Erie, not Lafayette. And by that, I understand it means organic growth. And the comprehensive plan can really turbocharge growth. And I'm not against growth, but I do think it's important to keep an eye on the big picture. And that's the mission, vision, and values that's on the wall in your chambers. And that I think is very close to what the people really want. How's my time?
Great.
I have a couple more things that I want to say if I still have time.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. I really like what Steve Brown said about this plan being approachable, understandable, and actionable. With reference to Commissioner Choi's comment, like not what we did, I do think we need to be discerning and not throw out the baby with the bathwater. A lot of people like that this is a suburban town. And while I'm not saying we can't deviate from that, I think we need to think of, changes that will complement what we have and not go in some completely different direction. I appreciated Commissioner Hunt's approach of agreement around growth, but I would urge you to remember not to become an echo chamber, which is easy to do in a group. And I trust that all of you are independent thinkers and with great powers of analysis, and that you're willing to stand up and not just consider consensus to high school. I really appreciated Commissioner Choi's idea, parallel lines never meet. I've been thinking the same thing, not as eloquently. Please keep the big picture in mind and remember to stay in touch with the community's values. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a couple other people, but no other raised hands at this time. Any additional commission feedback to Jeff, to the team? This time, no? All right, Jeff, how are you feeling about it? You need something more from us?
No, this is great. Like I said, we just wanted to introduce it for tonight, and there's more to come on this, so you'll be able to hit the ground running more the next time now that you know what we're doing here. Yep.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for participating. We will just move into Planning Commission comments. This is for the new commissioners. This is a time, we can use it for anything that's appropriate. Oftentimes in the past, it used to be like, hey, the ice skating rink is still open. Everybody should go and have fun. Or welcoming our new commissioners. I think we've touched on that a little bit, but it's great to have you all on board for certain. Is there any other comments anybody wanted to make? All right, we offer up staff comments.
No staff comments, but per your agenda, there are several other items that'll be before you soon. So housing plan we mentioned. I mentioned that we'll be talking more about the comp plan here in a month. And then you've got some project updates coming your way. Highway 42 downtown vision plan. This is in addition to the land use cases that'll be coming before you. So despite the fact that your first meeting was canceled for the new members, like no worries, there's plenty that will be coming before you.
Great, excellent. With that then, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
A second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Management approach, and they also benefit wildlife, so there's a mutual benefit between the resources there.
This is a big sale that they've been working on for several years, just finished it up a couple months ago.